I'm going to start this video off by saying white supremacist Latinos are pathological liars. Their ideologies are illogical and they rely off of third-party information from their white fathers and forefathers. So it's often a waste of time even debating them. They're just as fork-tongued as Anglo-white supremacists, just less creative and intelligent. Now this woman says Latinos and blacks always been together, when that's the furthest thing from the truth. We do not really know these people. Our only relation to them has been blacks fighting for things that benefit the collective of oppressed people and real injustice.
Latino and black communities have always been like this, and we should continue staying like that. There's no reason why the two communities should be fighting.
Y'all haven't helped us worth a damn. Black people are the reason y'all over here. It was black leaders who's the main ones caping for you. Even today, it's black people who's creating all of these set-asides that we're going to stop right now, by the way. We ain't co-signing that. And I say, hold your own nuts. I say, I'm doing the same thing, and we're doing the same thing that y'all did with Zimmerman. We're doing the same thing y'all doing with Officer Yanez. You understand? We're doing the same thing y'all doing with this cop out here in New York smacking black folks up. We're doing the same thing y'all doing about Latino gang cops on the police force out here. You have Latinos who are actually cops who are actually in police gangs.
Now, in one conversation, take a look at this. A Latina LAPD officer offered this advice on how to fight African Americans, saying, quote, "You hit black people in the liver. I heard they got weak livers." The complaint also claiming officers reportedly referred to black people as monkeys.
We're doing the same thing you're doing. We're doing the same thing y'all doing about the Nazi lowriders, Hispanic gang out there in them prisons. We're doing the same thing that y'all doing about the Serenos and the Longos and all these other white supremacist clicked up Latino gangs that y'all don't do nothing about, who's been terrorizing civilians for decades.
Because an alliance of convenience was to take place on both sides of the equation. Mexican mafia formed an alliance of convenience with the Aryan Brotherhood because we had common enemies.
So we think about these black lives matter that they want to be paid for being slaves and all that.
Reparations.
Yeah, there.
Are you talking about reparations? Well, I heard they passed in North Carolina.
Yes.
But it was
What?
it was a small little town in North Carolina that passed reparations for whoever's over there. I'm sure they'll try to do something out here in California. I think they already actually got a little board going that they're going to start looking into it. So
Yeah, and that's when we, the raza, need to step up, protest, and I'm talking major, and turn around and tell them, no, nobody getting reparations until the Native Americans and the Mexicans get ours first.
listen, brother,
We've been going through this crap a lot longer, so I don't want to hear it. Because it's not fair, dog. How are you going to give a bunch of money to a specific group, dog? This is the United States, a melting pot. How are you going to give it to a specific group?
Because right now they've got the white people with so much guilt. It was your parents.
Hand out $500 billion in reparations.
Over 40% of the population in California is Latino. You're having people who are the object of persecution pay for the reparations of people who just don't want to work.
It is outrageous to see people asking for reparations, even though they never went through slavery. These ungrateful people should be celebrated because they were born in the greatest nation to ever exist. Here's a tip. If you don't like America, finally, get the fuck out.
They commit all these white supremacist acts as a group but will fall back into other racial categories.
There's also a classification that says non-white, Latino, or Hispanic. Because for the millionth time, Latino and Hispanic are not racial categories.
A DPS trooper, siren blaring, coming up fast. He pulls over this driver for speeding last May. Pastor Gonzalez Sosa only speaks Spanish, tells the trooper he's from Mexico. But guess what race the trooper, who's Hispanic and also speaking Spanish, marks down on Sosa's ticket? White.
More than half of Hispanics in the United States identify as white. That reflects their overall history in the West. They have been flunkies for the white supremacist and tethers to the black community. There's no running from your past.
The Invention of Hispanics. What it says about the politics of race. This transformation took effort, because many Mexican Americans had traditionally seen themselves as white. When the 1930 census classified Mexican American as a race, leaders of the community protested vehemently and had the classification changed back to white in the very next census. Mexican Americans themselves left no doubt that they did not feel like members of a collectively oppressed minority at all. As Scary noted, the race idea is somewhat at odds with the experience of Mexican Americans, over half of whom designate themselves racially as white. Even in the early 1970s, according to Mora, many Mexican American leaders retained the view that persons of Latin American descent were quite diverse and would eventually assimilate and identify as white. And yet Spanish Hispanic Latino is now a well-established ethnic category in the U.S. Census, and many who select it have been taught to see themselves as a victimized underclass. How did this happen? At that time, Mexican Americans were as white before the law as they were in their own estimation. Half a century later, many Mexican Americans had been persuaded of a very different origin story. Peter Scary, a political scientist at Boston College, discussed this movement in his 1993 book, Mexican Americans, the Ambivalent Minority. The idea, Scary wrote, was to convince people that like blacks, Mexican Americans comprise a racial minority group. This abstraction poses no problems for the ideologically oriented Chicano activists who see the world in such terms. Roybal, an Army veteran and distant descendant of New Mexico's Spanish settlers, was one of many Democrats at the time whose success in local politics owed much to Alinsky's organizing tactics. Alinsky's groups also trained men like Herman Gallegos, Julian Zamora, and Ernesto Galarza, Chicano movement intellectuals who used Yulvisacker's Ford Foundation money to found the interest group La Raza in 1968. What all these radicals sought, and were quite successful at eventually achieving, was to analogize the experience of black Americans to that of Latinos. The term La Raza, literally the race, by itself epitomized this process of racialization. But why have so many people been co-opted into believing in the validity of this invented racial category? Mora explains, a sort of collective amnesia sets in as organizations begin to refer to the new category's long history and develop narratives about the rich cultural basis of the classification. By then, the category is completely institutionalized, and the new classification is, like other classifications, assumed to have existed since time immemorial. One of the things he wanted this survey to find out was in what respect the Mexican American experience was comparable to that of Negroes today. The same thing, however, could have been said in the late 1960s of the Scots-Irish in Appalachia or Italian Americans in the Bronx. But these experiences were not on the same level as the crushing and legal discrimination that African Americans had faced on a daily basis. Assimilation has been a goal of Mexican Americans for most of their history. 115,000 or so former citizens of Mexico chose to stay north of the Rio Grande after the 1846-48 Mexican-American War. They occupied a territory much like many others that America obtained either through purchase or at the point of a sword. Like the Dutch of New York, or the Cajuns and Spanish of the Louisiana Purchase, Mexican Americans freely intermarried with the Scottish, Irish, Scots-Irish, and German Americans who populated the Southwest.
Okay, we have fought next to each other, side by side, since the Civil Rights Movement.
Where are the Hispanics? Are they in the back somewhere? Can you find one Hispanic? There was none there.
One member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee felt that the march, quote, was largely symbolic and would do little to change things. That is what 73-year-old Maria Varela told Contreras, quote. So we were going to have this huge gathering of people. Then what?
As you can see, Hispanics was doubting the idea of black civil rights activism. Also notice how she's using the word we. Like the Hispanic committee had a say-so or big role to play in the national civil rights events. The arrogance and entitlement of these leeches is crazy.
Many of the larger U.S. Latino civil rights organizations were thinking of publicly denouncing the march.
They really was going to publicly denounce the Civil Rights March, something that had nothing to do with them. Do you recognize those patterns today? They ultimately had a change of heart because they realized how powerful black people was. So they just joined the bandwagon and organized their own little march in Austin, Texas with the local black people at the last minute.
But in the end, decided against it since they say that it could symbolize a much larger movement. Contreras also wrote this. A coalition of black and Mexican Americans held a companion march on that same day in Austin, Texas, which drew roughly 900 people, according to the Texas State Historical Association.
900 people, not even all protesters. It was 250,000 people at the March on Washington. There wasn't one Hispanic there. Not one minority. Pay attention to their lack of numbers as well, yet these people of color will talk about how their ancestors been here, while holding a plate of empanadas and jerked bat wings.
Okay? There's no time for beef on either side. We need to stand together, especially with everything that's going on right now in this country. So just a reminder that the Latino community and the black community are like this always.
I hate niggas. I'm anti-black. Nigga, I'm KKK, nigga. I hate niggas.